if I had a list, I had told God, I'm going to tear it up. You're going to have to make this list based on who you want me to have, because what I've been picking or thinking was okay to go out with was not the one, you know.
Go to dinner, and we're just having just a casual conversation, and finally got to the dessert. And I was like, hey, James, can you bring apple pie? And he goes, sure. She asked her, and she was like, no, I'm fine, thank you. So James comes out with 2 dishes, and she's so funny. She's like, excuse me, I didn't order this.
I said, oh, I didn't order any pie.
Take a girl and a guy, and they fall madly in love and form a family. Sprinkle in some counseling degrees and a doctorate, a dream of transforming relationships as we know it. And 20 years later, we give you power couple Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. And this is Couples Synergy.
Welcome back to another episode of Couples Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean. Hi, I am Dr. Ray.
And I'm Jean. And this is our podcast about love, marriage, and relationships.
Please check us out online on our Facebook page and Instagram at Couples Synergy, or our website, couplessynergy.com. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast or send us any suggestions on topics you'd like to hear more about. And now on to Couples Synergy, an in-depth look at love, marriage, and relationships, where we bring you our experience helping thousands of couples transform their relationships for over 20 years.
You know, every day we get to hear intimate details about a couple's celebrations, disappointments, and everyday challenges. We've often wished these stories were shared because we know we are more similar than different. So we've created not only an avenue where you can hear about people's intimate lives, but an atmosphere where people come over to our home pub, pour a drink, and share their stories.
People like today's guests, Darrell and Veronica Williams, they are both master certified life coaches, keynote speakers, and workshop facilitators who provide clients with expertise in the realm of leadership, relationships, and purpose. Darrell's leadership coaching is based on a stellar 20-year military career where he traveled as an operations and vice presidential communications officer, leading over 500 White House missions. And Veronica is a licensed minister and has been involved in life coaching for many years, and her experience has influenced women and strengthened couples throughout the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Welcome so much to our show, the two of you. Thank you so much for being on it.
Thank you for having us.
So you guys have a lot of background history and have been helping a lot of people for many years now. Before we get to that and kind of the work that you do, why don't you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves? How old are you and how long have you been together?
Sure. So interesting. We're both 55. Both of our birthdays are in February, but she's older than me.
I'm 5 days older.
And an interesting fact about us is we grew up in Compton, California, and we both went to the same middle and high school, but we never dated. And we ended up meeting after our 10-year reunion, kind of reconnecting.
Oh, did you know each other when you were back in the school together?
We knew each other, but it was mainly we all had the same friends. So it was a really interesting story where it's like I knew of her and definitely knew she was one of the smarter young ladies in the school, but we just never really connected on the, deeper friendship.
Wow. So then you guys reconnected at a reunion.
Yes, at our 10-year reunion.
How did that go?
It was interesting because at that time, we just kind of showed up there to celebrate, those 20 years at Compton High or 10 years rather. And then at that time, I was stationed in the DC area. So I flew out to California where Veronica and everybody was. And it was just funny, just after that, you start reconnecting with people. And she was definitely one of those friends that definitely admired and said, hey, let's just kind of stay connected, right? And then just over those few years after that, we just saw that the friendship just kind of moved into a different direction.
And what was it about each other that you fell in love with?
Well, for me, we were both Christians, and he was a real Christian, And what I mean by that, in singleness, you meet other guys that have a faith in God and say that they go to church and that they do certain things, but they're not as active. and they're not as committed. And so for him, for me to be shown his character and who he really was, as far as his commitment to God and ministry, that is what impressed me about him. But more importantly, just conversating, building a friendship, and feeling really comfortable about him. I was typically a little shy back then, growing to be bold a little bit, but at the same time, in our friendship, we talked about so many things. I was comfortable with him, and we spent, hours talking. And part of that, I looked at it from a bigger picture as far as seeing who he really was. What type of guy is he really, and is this someone that I want to continue to spend my time with, and where is it going? But I didn't really have to answer those questions. He pretty much proved where he was going.
So what age were you when you guys met up again at the reunion?
We were 28. Of course, for me, I was single, wasn't really dating anybody, had some male friends, but they weren't, the relationships or the friendships weren't going in a direction of marriage or anything in that sort. And when I met Darrell, I was just at a pivotal point in my life where I was fine and comfortable with being single because I was so sold out in my faith and in the ministry that I worked in at my church that I figured God would send him around the corner when we were both ready. And it happened to be that it was Darrell around the corner. And that's how, from just talking to each other, really learning about each other, having fun, laughing, developing a friendship, and then seeing how it made a huge shift. And I had to decide whether I was ready for that shift.
And then for me, I was in the DC area again, getting ready to PCS to Korea for 1 year. I knew I was coming back to the DC area. So, when we were talking as friends, it was more of, okay, definitely don't want to keep her hanging like that. So I was like, hey, if you happen to, obviously meet somebody while I'm gone and have those conversations shift, totally understand, because I definitely want to respect the friendship.
And what prompted you to join the military?
So for me, growing up in Compton, I grew up during the time of Boys in the Hood, and my brothers and sisters grew up during the time of straight out of Compton. So at that time, I'm sure it was like the fourth most dangerous city in the United States. And I just had to make a decision as the oldest of four. It's like, what am I going to do with my life? I knew that we did not have the money or any type of resources for college, right? So that definitely wasn't going to be a possibility. And I was so interested. My junior year, I ran into a recruiter, and I was like, man, I don't want to talk to this guy. So I just made up some excuse like, hey, I'm going to college. And he was like, oh, what college are you going to? And I was like, I don't know, Little Rock, Arkansas, University of Arkansas. And he opened up this book, Gene, and had like the prices of like what it cost and tuition and everything. And it just like I had an aha moment, like, you know what? This is about to get serious. Maybe I need to listen to this guy. So I just listened to his pitch, and it just made sense. He was talking about, you get to travel the world, let the military, Uncle Sam pay for your education, and you get to learn a trade. And I was like, you know what? That sounds like a great idea. I didn't have everything else lined up. So for me, I actually signed up on what they call the delayed entry program. So I was before high school, my senior year, I already joined the military. I just had to keep my nose clean and not get into trouble.
And which branch did you join?
Yeah, I served in the Army for 20 years as a military human resources supervisor.
Great. Well, thank you for your service.
Well, thank you.
Did you know that when you were going in that you'd be a career person?
The first 4 years, I did not. I really was just trying to get a feel for it. And I was really fortunate. I had two cousins, one was in the Navy and one was in the Army, and they only did their first enlistment. And I was able to talk to them before I joined. And both of them, without knowing what the other said, both told me, don't go in there just to get a stereo system. Don't go in there just to get a car. I mean, they were like, really pay attention to what's going on. And if there's nothing out here, by the time your first enlistment is up, go ahead and stay in. And they both said their biggest regrets is that they did not stay in the military. So it was on my mind, but I wasn't sure until after those first 4 years.
Yeah, it always seems like when you get close to that re-up, then you're like, oh, and then you do it again and do it again.
That's true.
As opposed to it being a big plan. Yeah.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And where were you guys at in your lives when you met back up at the reunion?
So at that time, like I said, Veronica was sold out. I was on the East Coast, sold out, and I was actually working with youth. I was like a youth director at that time. I wasn't a youth minister yet, but just working with youth. I just had this great passion for just helping steer kids in the right direction. And being able to do that in a faith-based environment was really cool for me because, some kids, they're like, that Bible stuff, that's old, doesn't mean anything to me. And I just love taking those older stories and bringing them into up-to-date times. And they were like, wow, is that what that really means? And I was like, yeah. And so we were both kind of on a faith-based journey and not really looking to get married, but just doing whatever God had called us to do and trying to, live out our purpose.
So you're pretty far apart and you're getting to know each other over a long period of time. What happens after that?
Well, after that, we talked, and it was a particular New Year's. We had talked for several hours that day. He was here on the East Coast. I was on the West Coast. The day had passed by because, of course, there was a 3-hour time difference. And I had already made a commitment to go out with some friends. And I said, oh, my ride is going to be here soon. So I got to hurry up and get off. But it was nice talking to you. We'll talk again. I didn't realize we had talked this long, but it was just so smooth. So we just meshed. So I went to my event that I had for New Year's. And when I got back home, he had left me a voicemail message. Back then, we leave voicemail messages. Mm-hmm. And the tone was different. The sound was different. It was just something different about it. And so me being who I am, I was like, whoa, Lord, that sounds a little bit different. I'm not going to call him back for 3 days because I'm going to be praying about this. And so for 3 days, I didn't call him back. He didn't call me either. He really waited for me to call him. And somehow on that third day, I think it was a Monday, Tuesday, a Wednesday, we both actually had Bible study on Wednesdays. And so when I got home from Bible study, I think we had connected. He had called me and we talked. And I told him, I said, well, your call sounded a little bit more serious than what I thought I was ready for. So that particular call, he asked, how would I feel about taking our friendship a little further into a long distance relationship? And so for me, I would tell him, I said, well, for me, you're gonna have to do something very taboo, and you're gonna have to court me. And what I meant by that is you're going to have to really show me that, you want this. And then I said, I would like to date with a purpose in mind. Back then, people would date and they figure, oh, we're really going to be boyfriend and girlfriend by the time we're 3 months in. And then by the 4th month, they separate. There is no relationship. So at this point, I had gotten my heart involved. I really was liking him. I really was interested. I knew he was in the military. We had always talked about the military, what he does, what it would look like if someone was to marry him and what his life is like. And, for me being a civilian, what would it be for a civilian wife in the military, handling the job that you have, which he had a confidential job at the time. And he was actually on the last 7 years of his military career. A lot for me to think about. So we talked about it. I told him I would consider it, but, just give me some time, because after all, I really never had a real boyfriend. Of course, I dated people, but, really, I was probably someone that they went out with along with some others. So I wasn't really like number one, but he was showing me all the while that I was number one. And there were certain questions we would ask. There were certain things that we would just get in detail. And by us both being spiritual, I really got into the Word of God, into my Bible, and into my prayer life was already strong. And I would just hear from God. And one of the things, I was honest with him, I was like, God, I really never made this type of commitment, even though I hung out with guys for several times, for several months, or even maybe a couple of years, but a commitment to what I told him about a purpose. You're going to have to really prep me for this, because at the time I was very close with my family. I was the youngest of a large family. And it was going to require me moving. And I was almost since I was the single family member in my family, I often was the one that was dependent on to go take my parents to the doctor or to spend time with them if they needed help or, whatever. So I knew that was going to be some transition time that I would have, because I could not imagine myself not ever living in California. And number one, not ever being with my family and all of my friends that were there. And as a result, we started talking. That was a January. By March, he branded me. He sent me a pendant. He sent me a pendant in the mail with DW on it, standing, that stood for Darrell Williams. And when I got it, I was like, oh, Lord, this guy is really serious. I'm really going to have to put my foot to the fire and really, really think about what am I doing here? Because for one, I was a very private person, and I had not shared with my family that Darrell and I were dating. I hadn't really shared that with them. Partly I was private, and I didn't really know where it was going. So I didn't want to be disappointed, and I didn't want, and at that time I was really learning how to depend on God and trust him to guide me. And that's pretty much how our conversations would go as well. The most difficult things that we had to talk about, whether it was my student loans, his situation, military, transitioning, all of that, we prayed about it, not together, but I would pray about it. And he would automatically bring it up. And that's what made the comfort level for us, is that it was an easy topic for us. Although naturally it would be difficult getting to know someone and talking about finances and all of that. But we talked very, very in depth. And as a result of him branding me, I had to really make that decision that, yes, I will say yes to him.
What was going on for you? What was the message you left on New Year's? And what was it like for those 3 days? And how did you decide to brand her?
So for me, what happened was I was there with my roommate, who was my best friend. We were in his condo, and we used to always have these we call hallway talk, right? We'd come outside of our door, we'd just sit down and just talk about our day and life. And my friend Mac was like, man, so you've been really seriously with her. Like, what's going on? Like, could she be the one? And I'm like, the one what? And I'm like, I'm ready to go to Korea. Like, what are you talking about? And he really was like, I don't know. I mean, what if there's really something there? And the funny part, Gene, was I was in my mind trying to be such a good friend that I was like, I can't think about her like that, right? It's not fair for her to wait for me for a year, right? That's not what a friend would do. So the interesting part was I was talking with him, and it was like for the first time I was like, I never really looked at it as she was the one. I just loved our conversation. Thought she was a great friend. And once we started talking, it was like, yeah, what if she is the one? Right. And then I started thinking like, okay, well, still not fair for her to wait for me when I go to Korea. So part of me on the inside was, we're just going to stay friends. But like you said, after that talk in New Year's, I was like, okay, I know we're talking about the longest relationship, but I'm like, it's not fair for her to wait. So I need to be really like, is this really the right one as well? So I had to pray about it as well. And then it just kind of hit me like, you know what? If she's going to wait, you need to make sure there's something worth waiting for. So that's when I went and got the ring and kind of like, okay, it was early in January, so I wasn't leaving for Korea until the fall. So I pretty much still had up until the summer. So like she said, during that time, building up to the proposal, was just more of, like she said, just let her know that, being in the military, I'm all about commitment, I'm all about purpose, right? So it was like, I don't have time for games, but I was old too, right? 28 years old. Like, you don't have time for games. You're trying to figure out your career and, things like that. And like I said, those 3 days, it was really like me asking myself, what would be the best thing to help her understand my career? Because that was my biggest thing. And as we talked before the broadcast, military relationships are tough. They're very different than most. Not saying first responders and those types of individuals have the same similarities, but just from the common civilian marriage, it does take a little bit more. So one of the things that I did was just thinking about what those resources I could give her to kind of allow her to, just get an idea of what military service was like.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they don't know that. There's a lot of misconceptions about, why military couples get married very young.
Yes.
Right. And, it's a difference between whether you have your spouse on base, and benefits, or versus living separate. And, there's that time frame of deployment and everything. And, so there's a lot more pressure and factors that military couples have that most couples don't.
So true, Dr.
Yes. And so, as time went on, I shared Darrell with my oldest sister, who was my mentor as well. And I let her know about him. And all along, Darrell was sending, back then, it seems so long ago, but we had cassette tapes where he would just sing me nice music, because we both liked music.
Mixtapes.
Right. And then he would, because we used to call him a friend of mine and I, his best friend, and his wife and I, we called Darrell Radio Raheem, because our DJ Raheem, because he loves music. He loves rap music, but he loves Christian rap music. And he used to rap in high school. And so we call him that on the side, and he knows all about it. We call him in front of him. Mm-hmm. And so I wasn't surprised by the music, but it was really, really some really good music. And each song was a message that he was sharing with me. And that's how it went. And I was letting him know, I said, well, if you go to Korea and you meet someone, I'm okay with that. If I meet someone, I really don't want to make, I don't want to do this if this is not meant for us to happen. But there was no shaking him. I couldn't shake him. Nothing I could say. And really, it was nothing that I could say it verbally, but my heart couldn't shake him. I think he won over my heart for who he was and the kind of individual that he was. And a lot of women make lists as to what type of men they want and whatever. If I had a list, I had told God, I'm going to tear it up. You're going to have to make this list based on who you want me to have, because what I've been picking or thinking was okay to go out with was not the one, and that's how it all turned out. It turned out that way. He went In the meantime, we did have a little gap where it was about a couple of months where we did not talk after we made this kind of decision to, and that was because his military career took him overseas.
TDY for sure.
TDY for. But what he did do is he sent me a military spouse book. That was he did. Well, he didn't do it then, but eventually he gave me material to read about that. Let's just say that. I don't want to get ahead of our story. I mean, like, no, but I know when he sent it to me. But yeah.
So when do you see each other again?
So now we get to the good part. So I'm going to Korea and I'm leaving, I think, out of Missouri. And I'm like, wait a minute, they may fly out of the West Coast. So I called the people and say, hey, where else can I fly out of Korea? They're like, oh, you can fly out of Seattle, Washington. I'm like, perfect. Change my flight. I want to fly to Seattle. So during this time now, I'm like, I got the ring, right? I'm like, I'm going to propose to her. I'm not going to have her waiting without having something on her finger. It just wasn't fair. So I did, at that time, I was working for the White House Communication Agency, right? Doing a lot of travel, going back and forth. And what was so interesting was toward my first end of that career, before I went to Korea, they moved me to the recruiting team because I had so much experience. It's like, hey, if you can travel with us, right, that'd be great. You kind of have a good feel for some of these recruits. And one of the places we went to was Seattle, Washington. The hotels, everything around here for a whole week of recruiting. I'm like, man, this is a really nice place. So fast forward when I find out that I'm flying out of Seattle, so I give her a call, it's like, hey, I'm flying out of Seattle. Now, she didn't know anything about, the proposal or anything, right? I'm like, I'm flying out of Seattle. Just want to know if your schedule permits, then we can connect on the weekend, different rooms and all that good stuff. And just kind of, share some time before I go to Korea. So she said yes. And the good thing for me is I knew where we were going to be staying. So I was able to call back to the hotel and say, hey, this is me from the White House Communications group that was there. Yeah. And they had a huge restaurant there that was really nice. I mean, it was a lot of spacey, but it was very intimate. So I called the manager and said, hey, I'm going to be there. I'm going to propose, right, to my girlfriend. And I really want to get that one booth, right, that's in the center of your restaurant. He's like, absolutely. It's not a problem. We got you covered. And so once she showed up, right, kind of freshened up, just kind of talked, and it's like, okay, let's go out to dinner, right? I already know the restaurant. So we go to the restaurant, and my man James, I had already hooked up with James, right? Gave him the ring. And at that time, she wasn't a big dessert person. So I said, James, I'm going to order 2 apple pies, right? Put them underneath the dish. One would be for me, and the other one would be the ring for her. And I already know she's going to say, I didn't order pie. I said, but leave it anyway. So we had it all set. We go to dinner. And we're just having just a casual conversation. And finally got to the dessert. And I was like, hey, James, can you bring apple pie? And he was sure. She asked her, and she was like, no, I'm fine. Thank you. So James comes out with 2 plate dishes. And she's so funny. She's like, excuse me, I didn't order this.
I said, oh, I didn't order any pie. He said, but here's your pie, And I mean, literally, and it was it was theatrical. It was a silver, I think of it like the French, the French maize. It was very nice, very, very nice. And he was like, here's your pie. And I was like, okay, never mind, just leave it, because I didn't want to cause a ruckus. Like, James, I didn't order any pie. So he leaves it. And
then from there, I kind of went into the spiel, military, right? Practice speech over and over, right? And I started telling her, like, these last couple of months, I've never expected to feel this way. When I'm going to Korea, but you are really special. And for anybody that's as special as you shouldn't have to wait. People need to let you know how much they care about you. So I got on one knee, and it was so funny. It just seemed like the whole restaurant just started looking at us like, oh my gosh, I think he's proposing up there. And I opened up a pie dish, and my man James hooked it up, had the ring sitting right where it needed to be, took it out, gave it to her, and hit that last line, will you marry me? But then there was a pause because Veronica started hyperventilating. So they had to bring her a bag, and I'm like, I'm still waiting on yes.
Mind you, I hadn't told my parents that I was going to visit him. I was just going on vacation. My sister knew I was going to visit with Darrell, but they hadn't known about him that much. And so I was more nervous about when I get back home, I got to tell my parents that I'm engaged, because you still never, even though I lived on my own, you're still never, the baby of the family is never really independent of the parents when they have a really good relationship. And so that was really what I was scared about. But I did eventually get myself together, get some water, and I did say yes. And that's.
And then the interesting part was when it was time to tell her parents, that's like, we got to call her parents, right? So called her mom and dad, and it was so cool. And dad was like, that's nice. Looking forward to meeting you. Like, hey, congratulations. It was like, yeah, this thing is on hold until I see you.
That's awesome.
So what was the time frame from when you first started dating to the proposal? How long was that?
So it was like really like from that January 97 to August. I left in August to go to Korea in 97. So like from January to August.
Okay, so that's a pretty short time, right?
It was. Mm-hmm. It really was.
But total, it was about 9 months or so. Yeah, because even though we kind of put it at that point, we already were probably committed to one another anyway, but just wasn't saying it, and we were okay with that.
Mm-hmm. True.
So how was it meeting the family?
So what I did was, and when you go to Korea, right, they give you the option to do they call it your mid-tour leave, right? So after 6 months, right, you can normally go back home, refresh, get yourself together for 30 days, and then you come back and finish your last 6 months. So for me, we were talking, I was like, you know what? I really don't need to go back to DC, right? We're going to live there. So it was like, why don't we go, I'm going to come to California. That way I can meet the family. And then one thing that we were committed to doing was we wanted to do premarital counseling. And our church had a great counselor, Pastor Haig, to this day, I love the man, he's so awesome. So it was like, I'm gonna come back, I'm gonna plan the wedding, and then do the do the premarital counseling, and then also meet the family. So it was so interesting meeting the family because again, I'm the oldest, right? And she's the youngest. Right. So it's not like this young guy that's 20-something trying to figure life out. It's like I'm a career military person at this time. Like she said, my last couple of years or 2 tours left, but I knew we were going to be at the same spot. So it was really interesting dynamic because here's this guy that they never met that's very confident in what he says and how he says it. And then here's Veronica, who's kind of like very shy, kind of to herself. And it was so cool because meeting the dad, like he was a big sports guy, right? So I was like, I'm in there. He's a Dodger fan. I'm a Dodger fan. And when I went, when she picked me up, I went straight to there because I wanted to make sure I talked to the dad and really I know I kind of skipped a little bit of the normal steps, but I want to do things right. I really, want to make sure that you're okay with marrying your daughter, even though, like I said, she's 28, right? But the interesting part was he and I talked about sports so much. We talked about the Bible. We talked about everything. And I remember Veronica was like, what are they talking about in there? What's going on? And we went to a separate room, and then, and it really wasn't until like the very end, I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I really want to make sure I ask your permission to, for marriage. And he was like, oh, you're good.
That's awesome.
Really, I just love that story, that whole dynamic. It was so cool.
And my mother, on the other hand, was like, is he trying to marry you to get that base pay? Is that what it's called?
Something like that.
To get that extra pay, because my mother had brothers that was in the military and that had careers. So she was like, you better make sure he's not trying to, and so my mother was like, you better make sure he's not just marrying you just so he can get that extra income and live on base for because he got a wife, he gets that extra pay. I was like, Mom, I'm pretty sure it's not that. And, we talked and everything. My mom, she did eventually open up to him. But I think the hard part for my parents was envisioning me not being in California because, of course, I was close with my family. But we were all in preparation for that. I had a family meeting where I had all my siblings and my mom and my dad, and we talked out. I let them know I had planned the wedding. I let them know that this is the wedding, and I'm taking each of what you guys are each good at, and that's how I'm going to put you in the wedding. I had one sister, she raised her hand, and she was like, are you taking suggestions? I said, we're taking them, but do not be offended if they're not used. And so my one brother was on the floor. He was like, oh my goodness, she finally got her voice. She's able to speak up and not let you guys rule her.
And another interesting thing was later that year, her parents about to celebrate, I think it was like 50 years in marriage. Mm-hmm. So one of the other questions was, is she going to be able to come back to this event? I'm like, absolutely. Right. So now here's me thinking, okay, military, right? How do you make that big splash? Well, Korea, they are great if you give them a picture and they can paint that picture, to the T. So I said, hey, I need you to send me a picture of your mom and dad. She's like, for what? This is going to be our gift to them for the 50 years. And oh my gosh, Ray and Jean, they gave this really beautiful picture and they painted it like they were like a Egyptian king and queen. So it was like their face in this background, beautiful picture. Just huge, right? So I get this thing on time, mail it to her, right, from Korea. And she's at the event, so I couldn't wait to hear about it, right? And, it was so funny how she had everything covered up. So obviously when she gave her gift, needless to say, it just stole the show. Right. You couldn't even top that. So I knew after that, I was like, I'm good with mom and dad for life.
Yes. And they do. They loved him. They were like, yeah, he's the one.
What was it like adjusting to finally living together and being apart from your family?
So that part is definitely when I sent her a book. Military has some really good books. So I sent her this book called The Life of a Military Spouse. One of the best things I could have did. One thing, like I said, she's my friend. So I wanted her to know everything. I wanted her to be prepared, right? So I sent her that book that really kind of started off that separation and get her know. And another thing I did was I paid for her to come visit me in Korea for Thanksgiving. I wanted her to see this is what boots on the ground looks like. Now, granted, I was coming back to DC to we call it a special assignment organization, but I just wanted her to know that this is what the military really looks like. And that trip was really good because, she's down there seeing tanks rolling down. Because in Korea, they do exercises every other month, right? Preparing for an invasion, right? From North Korea to South Korea. So she was able to really see like, oh my gosh, this is like real. So, the preparation of living apart from family, it was really a good idea to help her because she really knew like what was going to happen. And then when I came back right before we went to what we got for the wedding, we did the second part of our counseling. And here's the interesting part. Pastor Hayes looking over our paperwork, right? So we had to both answer all these questions, not talk to each other, not see what we wrote. And then he was going to go over them and then discuss them with us. So we get to the counseling thing, and he's like, I need y'all to sit down. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And he starts off like, all my years of doing this counseling, I'm like, oh my gosh, no way. He's not going to say something negative. And he goes, I've never seen two couples on paper that were so ready and connected to be married. And that just gave us the biggest, it's like, in our own mind, we knew we were, right for each other. But when he said that, I mean, that really just set the tone for the rest of our relationship moving forward. So we get married in California, then we get ready to drive back. And the cool thing about that, we drove across country, right, from California to Maryland. So imagine all the conversation we had. I mean, it wasn't pretty much anything I didn't know about her that she didn't know about me, because we talked about everything going through, we went to school together, but it was like all those little things, right? So it was really, really cool. So coming to Maryland, I mean, she was so awesome, because I was telling her, don't rush to get a job, take your time, right? And little Miss Busy here, she called me one day, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? She's like, oh, I'm coming home from work. I'm like, when'd you get a job? What is that? So independent, so just, I mean, she was really a true model of military spouse, which is that independence piece.
Yeah, I didn't think he probably felt that I wasn't going to adjust to driving from California to the DC area. People kind of tell you, oh, it's a lot of traffic. You have to, it's a lot different from California, that you have to go about 15 miles or 15 minutes on the highway before you can get off and all of that. But what happened was, I had called an agency just to inquire, and they was like, oh, you want to come in today? I have a job already. You can go today. I'm like, are you serious? I said, let me try it. So the lady, I said, well, I'm new here. I have never been to that area yet. I've gone before, but I haven't driven. So she gave me the directions how to get there. And I followed the directions. I arrived there. I was there. Went on the interview, and they were like, can you start today? I'm like, well, just call the agency. I'm available this evening. It was a job that I wanted. I was working at a pharmaceutical company as a researcher. So it was really great. And I think what happened is Darrell had called me to ask me where was I, because I think he made it home. And I was like, oh, I'm pulling in. I'm just coming from work. And so I hadn't had an opportunity to even call him and tell him where I was going, because he usually would always, we call it a recon in the military. He always would want to do a recon, or he always made sure that I had the directions. He was like, how did you find it? I said, you know me, I'm a Cali girl. We get around. We don't stay still, right? So it was very fun. And I think it was really reassuring for him that, oh, she's not going to have any problems adjusting. And not only did he give me the book, but when we got here, we wound up going to his church, and I met two ladies there who were, the men was his friends, and they really welcomed me. He had his first tour maybe about a month after we were there. They was like, well, he's out of town. You want to go to lunch? So I met them for breakfast, actually. They were two sister-in-laws. And they were dynamite for me. They really gave me the tidbits of what made their marriages successful, and what to do, and how marriages can be successful even with your spouse having a high stressful job, and being in demand, and having to go away, and you may not know the destination until it shows up on TV, which was most of the cases for us. And so I adjusted well, I believe, because I was disciplined in my civilian life. Being a part of it, coming into the military life, it just rolled right over. It wasn't a very hard thing. I don't think there was some minor adjustments, because there was times when there was events and he couldn't go and I had to go by myself. Those were some of the difficult changes in that. living together for us, it was easy. We didn't worry about toothpaste, you squeeze it from the top, I squeeze it from the bottom, or I like my tissue to roll out from the bottom, you like yours over. We didn't really have all of that. I think we were really in a process of just trying to make sure that we were meeting each other's needs, not worried about our own needs, but meeting each other's needs. And I think that's what really made it successful, along with us both being having a faith that led us and guided us in who we were spiritually and as individuals.
What sparked your interest in wanting to help military couples, and coach them? And what got you interested in that?
So for me, being a supervisor, right, being in a heavy travel organization, I saw firsthand what it looks like, right? And it can be devastating. So even though at that time when I wasn't married, right, seeing them go through that, and then after I got married, even having a big heart for them, it's like I wanted to make sure that every military couple has every resource possible to be successful, right? So that was really the drive, just being able to see that firsthand. And it was so great with Veronica, because now here's this military spouse that moved all the way from California, didn't know the military, right? But just her confidence, the way she carried herself, her faith, it was something that other young women can look up to and say, wow, I really like how you carry yourself, right? How do you handle this? How do you do that? So she was just a natural. So for me, again, we always talk about, using our gifts, right? And I told her that I think that when we get married, God's going to use us to help other military couples, right? I think this will be a natural thing. It's not going to be anything we have to, go out of character to do. I think it's just going to naturally flow. And that's kind of what happened, right? As people were PCSing in or coming to organizations, somebody would always direct them to hey, here's another young couple, we want to introduce them to you guys, right? And we just started off, and it was so cool because it wasn't like somebody told us to come see you because you help couples. It was somebody said we should know you. Mm-hmm. And every couple that we helped, it was really just out of friendship. It never was, right, we're going to use you guys as guinea pigs to coach you, right? It was just, hey, let's just talk. Let's, come over. Veronica was a great chef. I don't even call her a cook anymore, right? She's like a great chef. So I was like, hey, I got this young couple. I'm going to invite them over. And she was so open, like, yeah. I asked them what weekend they want to come. And it was so cool because anything over food is always great. So we were able to allow them to be comfortable. And then we just talked about life and what they wanted. And I think those were the things that helped us help other couples, because we didn't sit down with them intentionally to do that. It was just a natural progression. And they would always, we had so much fun at your guys' home. We called our parents and told them we met this great couple and they were happy for us now. So it was just a natural progression.
And for the women that I met, they just befriended me. They liked that I was open. They liked that I was a listener. And then I didn't have any judgment. It was like they knew that I was a confidential person just by how I carried myself is the reason why they wanted to do that. And even with that, teaching Bible study and Sunday school, the young people felt so comfortable with me that they would tell me to come to pray for their parents. And I said, oh my gosh, if their parents knew that they were telling me their business, they would be. But it gave us an opportunity for me to have Darrell go and befriend or just have a conversation with that father. Yeah. And then we could have dinner with them. So the kids didn't realize that we had their best interest to kind of help their families who might have been going through some struggles. And we just always just tell people that, marriage takes sacrifice. I like how Darrell always says it's about divorcing yourself. For me, it's also about being authentic, being honest, being truthful, and building a relationship of friendship before you even try to go deeper. And to just don't talk surface talk, but to talk the deeper things in life. to really realize what you guys do have in common and the things that may be a little different. How do you make those things work as well and adjust, and allowing each other to be individuals, and then and giving the women their voice. Some women felt like they didn't have their voice, especially for those spouses that were in leadership at work. They didn't know how to transition from being a leader at work to a leader at home. And I think that's where the breakdown is in some of the marriages.
And that was a great part that allowed me. So it never was me telling them what to do, but just asking those men some questions that made them go back and go, wow, I knew they were doing it to the wife, but I never put it like that. I just asked them certain questions. What can you do to make things better the next time you come back from the deployment? What can you do to make those? And they were like, wow, I got like a whole list of things that I can do. He's like, I appreciate the conversation. I'm like, hey man, that's what we're here for, right? We help each other, And just like Veronica said, just having just general conversations over food allowed a lot of the couples just to open up and share. And it was just an awesome thing to do.
What advice would you give someone that is considering getting married and living a military lifestyle?
One of the things I would tell them is, first of all, find a mentor couple. I am very big on mentors, because why wouldn't you want to have someone that's already walked that walk, talked the talk, had those challenges, right? It just makes so much sense to, and I always say, a older, wise couple, not a couple that's the same age as you, right? Not your friends, not her friends. It needs to be an older couple, because when you have a mentor couple, and you can have more than one, I tell them that, yes, you're going to make mistakes, but you're going to make less mistakes, and they're going to be smaller mistakes. So one of the biggest things I always share them is, please get connected with a mentor couple, and then connect and know about the resources that are available, right? If you're a young couple and, maybe you didn't manage money that well, guess what? The military has a platform that can help young couples with financial literacy. Right? If you're talking about having children, right, guess what? The military has a program for first-time moms and dads. So just mentors, and then connecting with resources.
And also, I would say getting into a premarital course. It could be through a life coach, or it could be through marriage counselors.
Absolutely.
Whatever fits your need. For if it's something deep from both of your past that you guys have not gotten over and worked through, we always refer you to the marriage counselors, those that really specialize in digging from the root of a situation and out. If it's something just to move you from today on, you guys are ready, and you want to decide, you don't really have anything from your past that is preventing you to even start your family or start, a life together, then I would say a life coach, or a relationship coach would be able to help guide you into that. Those are some of the key things that collectively, I believe, that will be able to help younger couples. And what you find is that it's not even so much that they're young in age, but you find a lot of people that are second timers, divorced or widowed, and going back into that dating scene and meeting someone. That's a good time to do it. So that you can learn not to make the same mistakes, and not even just make the same mistakes, but you learn new ways of work or how relationships are developing now.
I would add to everything you said and say that, seek out mentorship and, relationship counseling and life coaching of people who have experience. Right. Living out that military life, because there's some really serious factors that most people don't consider. There are high rates of divorce, as you mentioned, and high rates of alcoholism, drug abuse, and suicide as well. And so, there's always that kind of mortality, piece that's just hanging over people's heads once you sign that blank check to go, to the government. Right.
That's right.
And so these young couples, they're not really, familiar with that and all of those factors involved. And, a couple like yourselves that have that experience would be able to guide them in the best way.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about it is, if you're already having some issues before you want to say I do and before you start planning, it's a good time to seek out someone then, because you want to prevent any red flags. The red flags can be someone, either spouse to be has an addiction and is in denial of it. It may be something that is subtle, but there could be some abuse there. So it's a lot of little things that when we meet with couples, we can see some of the things that are very quick to pick up. And then there's some things that are very subtle that people just accept because they might have grown up in a family that didn't operate and look like a healthy marriage. And so we just call it, let's just strive to have a healthy marriage, because no marriage is perfect, but every marriage can strive to be healthy.
Absolutely.
So if someone were listening to this and wanted to get a hold of you guys, how could they find you?
Sure. So they can definitely find us on Facebook under Alliance Seminars Coaching. And they can always go to our website, which is allianceseminars.org.
Wonderful. Well, we'll put those all in the show notes too for everybody.
And what should they look for of when it would be a good time for them to, seek out these type of things that you guys do?
Well, we would just tell them, like Veronica said, when they're kind of serious about the relationship, they can come talk to us. A lot of people, it's so funny, they think, well, we're not engaged yet, so we didn't want to waste your time. We're like, no, we talk to dating couples as well, because guess what? It's a thing called dating with a purpose. And if we can help you date with a purpose and just talk about some things that, good to avoid, hey, the earlier the better.
So last question, what is it that your partner does that they love you?
I know that Darrell loves me when I might be cooking and he'll come in behind me and kiss my neck. And then there's subtle times when he might send me a text or it's the way that it's a look that shows me that, he loves me. It looks almost like when we first got married that I'm like, ooh, and I'm like, ooh, what's going on over there? So, but I know that he loves me because he shows me just really every day. And even, we make sure that we meet each other's needs. I think because he's so selfless that he worry about meeting my needs as far as he knows my love language. And I think by him meeting my love language, he knows, and he strives at that every day. That's how I know he loves me.
And then for me, knowing her love language, right? So instead of watching the games, right, downstairs and far apart, right, I cuddle up next to her when I'm watching the game or something like that. And then I know as soon as I get close to her, that she gets even closer, right? So that's how I definitely know that she loves me, because she's always willing to be as close as she can with me. And one of the things I definitely kind of share with people is, you definitely want to, again, get rid of that selfish piece and be more selfless. Because one of the great things that Pastor Hay told us when we were going through marriage counseling, I remember like it was yesterday, he said, Darrell, you have one job to do in this marriage. I said, Pastor Hay, you tell me what it is, I'm going to do it. I promise. I'm going to use all my military training and everything in me. He goes, your job is to make sure that she fulfills her purpose on this earth. That's it. He said, if you do that, everything else for you is going to fall in place. And I tell you, Ray and Jean, he was so right. Like my whole thing, I always tell people, I'm her executive assistant, right? I'm her booking agent. It's like whatever she needs me to do, that's what I do for her. And I can say, 24 years, whatever I did for her, I got it back tenfold. And
That's how it works. Yeah, it's all about what you can give.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And we always believe that the goal of every relationship is to help your partner become a better version of themselves.
Yes, we agree with that.
Well, Darrell and Veronica, we want to thank you so much for being on our podcast today. This has been quite a joy.
Thank you.
We're
so
much.
Happy as well.
Yeah, enjoyed you guys, and I just love what you're doing. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
You know, sharing stories is ways that human beings have been bonding and healing and growing since the beginning of time. And we hope that by you guys sharing your story, it's enriched your lives and the lives of our listeners.
We want to wholeheartedly thank all of you for joining us today, for listening to Couple Synergy. Our passion is in helping couples and people have happy and healthy relationships. And this podcast gives us a fun way of bringing our knowledge and expertise to you, our listeners. For all of you listening, please subscribe to our podcast and please leave us a review. If you have any questions, comments, or topic suggestions, please email us at contact@couplesynergy.com. For more information about Couple Synergy and our programs such as the Home Study Course, Relationship 101, the Couples Weekend Intensive, and our premier coaching program called Couple to Couple, look us up online at couplesynergy.com.
And if you know someone who could benefit from this episode, please download it and share it. And thank you for listening.
Until next time, synergize your life and synergize your love.
You have been listening to Couple Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. Couple Synergy was recorded, edited, and produced by Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. Voiceover and music entitled Breathe and Let Go was recorded and composed by Gina Gonzalez.